This guide covers all the actions Dawntrail's Conjurer and White Mage learns from level 1 to 100 in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use it when relevant, including advice on how to use the various healing and defensive options. We will summarize the attack rotation and general healing advice at level 50, and then in the final summary at level 100, we outline an optimized opener and explain how it leads into the general rotation alongside 2-minute burst considerations and healing advice. We also touch on the stat priorities of the White Mage. Now then, Stone is your starting spell, and it functions as your filler spell that you use when nothing more important, like healing, takes priority. Incorporating attacking in group combat is a core part of healing in Final Fantasy XIV, so it is better to practice finding time to do so as early as possible. It is, however, always more important to keep your group alive than being too greedy with damage. At level 2, you learn the spell Cure 1, which works as your efficient healing spell. This means that when you start getting access to other, more potent healing spells, Cure 1 becomes the spell you use only when you literally cannot afford anything else and are just desperately trying to hold on. It could also be used if you know you need to top someone's HP up, but you also know that using a more potent heal would be unnecessary. At level 4, you learn the spell Arrow, which is an instant attack that applies a damage over time effect, or DOT for short. The total damage of Arrow is more than twice as much as Stone, and is equal to Stone if the dot lasts at least 9 seconds on the target. You should try to apply Arrow to as many enemies as you can in a fight, before resorting to casting Stone. Reapply Arrow when its duration is at around 1 or 2 seconds to make sure it never drops off completely. At level 8, you learn the role action and spell Repose, which puts your target to sleep for 30 seconds or until they take direct damage. It is considered an extremely niche spell, and you may likely never ever need to use it. In the event that you do feel that there is an overwhelming amount of enemies in a dungeon, you can use this to stop enemies one by one. Take note that, as the sleep is only stopped by direct damage, the dot from Arrow does not actually cancel it, although applying Arrow itself will due to the upfront damage and the application of the dot. Repose can also sometimes be used to stop an enemy from casting a spell. At level 10, you learn the spell Medica 1. This is your simple area of effect, AoE for short, healing spell. If you need to heal more than one person at once, then this is much more time efficient than casting Cure on each of them one at a time. You also learn the role action and spell Ishuna, which removes a single removable debuff on your target. You can identify a removable debuff by the bluish-white line above the debuff icon. Some debuffs are more important to remove than others. For instance, a slow effect, whether it is movement or attack speed, is likely to assist your group more than spending that time casting Stone. Paralysis is especially important to remove, as the random stuns from it can end up being lethal, or especially problematic for mages, including yourself. Sometimes dots can be removed too, and sometimes they can be dangerous, and other times they're so weak that it isn't worth the effort of removing them. You can only tell for sure from the damage the affected player ends up taking, and then keeping it in mind for the future. At level 12, you learn the spell Raise. This is your resurrection spell that brings a dead player back to life. Be aware that it costs a lot of MP and takes ages to cast. When a player is resurrected this way, they lose some of their primary attributes, like strength, for a while, resulting in doing less damage. This is a minor issue. More importantly, when a player is resurrected, they are completely impervious to most damage and negative effects, except knockbacks, for 5 seconds, unless they do anything other than movement. Using Sprint also removes the effect. At level 14, you learn the role action and ability Lucid Dreaming, which recovers a massive 3,850 MP over 21 seconds. Unlike weapon skills and spells, abilities can be used while the global recast timer is spinning, also known as the global cooldown. After a spell with a cast time of 1.5 seconds or less, like Stone or Cure, you have enough time to weave a single ability, which is a crucial part of playing efficiently as a healer. Lucid Dreaming should be weaved on cooldown as long as you are below 8000 MP and should absolutely not be kept as a last resort reserve when you're already out of MP. Use it early and often, even if some of the NP it grants ends up going to waste. If you want to learn more about the global recast timer, global cooldown, and weaving, I have a video that explains this in much more detail in the description. At level 15, you unlock access to dungeons, so a tip if you're having problems keeping up with your tank in your groups. use Sprint when you see the tank do so. Additionally, you can also use Sprint just before entering combat, as this means Sprint lasts 20 seconds instead of 10. Take note that casting anything on your tank if they are in combat will also put you in combat. While the tank is pulling, you can make use of the time to apply Arrow to as many enemies as possible for some extra damage. At level 18, Stone permanently upgrades to Stone 2, greatly boosting its damage. However, Arrow still beats it if it lasts at least 15 seconds, so this does not really change anything for your rotation. You also learn the role action and ability Swift Cast, which makes your next spell instant. While this can be used to cast Cure, Stone, or Medica while on the move, the most important way to use it is to skip the enormous cast time of Raise. Outside of desperate measures as a last resort, you should only raise players with the combo of Swift Cast and Raise, to do so instantly. Without Swift Cast, you will rarely even have the opportunity or time to fully cast Raise in the first place. This does mean you typically only have the capacity to raise one player every minute. At level 30, you learn the spell Cure 2, which does not override Cure 1. Cure 2 is significantly more potent than Cure 1, but also costs significantly more MP. Even so, Cure 2 should be your go-to healing spell. The fact that Cure 2 costs more MP usually won't cause you any issues as long as you heal efficiently and use Lucid Dreaming often. Cure 1 should only be used as your last resort if you are genuinely out of MP. Also at level 30, doing your class quest line will eventually lead you to the White Mage quest, which is available once you complete the main scenario quest, Self-Management. Once you unlock the White Mage, remember to equip your Soul Crystal to change into the White Mage job. As an extra optional bonus, leveling Conjurer to level 30 gives you access to the quest Unicorn Power at the Conjurer's Guild, which awards you a unicorn mount. The starting action of the White Mage is the ability Presence of Mind, which allows you to cast much faster for 15 seconds. You will rarely ever need to spam healing spells so fast that Presence of Mind becomes necessary, so while you can save it as a panic button of some sort, it is recommended to use Presence of Mind on cooldown for spamming stone casts, as it will massively increase your damage output in its duration. You can also, in a desperate situation, use Presence of Mind to more easily find the time to cast Raise repeatedly without Swift Cast. Your spell cast will benefit from the cast time reduction as long as you manage to start the cast while the buff is still active on you, even if the buff runs out mid-cast. You can sometimes sneak in one more cast in the window of Presence of Mind if you initially weave it as late in the global cooldown as possible, called late weaving. Just make sure to not delay your next spell as a result. At level 32, you learn the trait Free Cure, which grants Cure 1 a small chance of causing your next Cure 2 to be free on cast. This only matters if you're using Cure 1 because you are running out of MP anyway. In those cases, a free Cure 2 could possibly be life-saving. Aside from this, you should not be casting Cure 1 to fish for these procs, as they're commonly called, as the time wasted by casting Cure 1 instead of Cure 2 could have been used on more useful things like attacking or even healing several players. At level 35, you learn the spell Regen, which is instant and applies a healing over time effect, hot for short, on your target that heals for almost 3 times the healing of Cure 1 for the same cost. This is, aside from big cooldowns learned later, your most powerful heal in terms of single target potency. In most situations, you want to keep Regen active on your tank as long as they're taking any meaningful amounts of damage, to save yourself from having to cast your more expensive heals. At level 40, you learn the spell Cure 3, which also does not override Cure 1 or 2. Cure 3 heals in an AoE around your target, however, the area it affects is slightly smaller than Medica 1. If players are stacked closely enough, Cure 3 is a very strong direct healing option. Just keep in mind that it is also quite expensive. In most cases, I recommend using Medica 1 instead, as it is much more likely to hit all the targets you intend to hit. You also learn the ability Ethereal Shift, which on a minute cooldown dashes you forward 15 yawns. This can be very helpful for quickly repositioning. For reference, the base run speed is 6 yawns per second. At level 44, you learn the role action and ability Surecast. This ability makes you immune to most knockbacks, and also makes you immune to interruption as a result of damage. What this means is that sometimes when you're hit with a particularly powerful attack, your spellcast is completely cancelled. This cannot happen when Surecast is active. At level 45, you learn the spell Holy, which is an AoE attack centered on yourself. Holy beats Stone 2 when it hits at least 2 targets, and beats Arrow with at least 3 targets, and so you should simply spam it while standing in the crowd of enemies. Take note that Holy takes the full 2.5 seconds to cast, so you cannot weave anything between attacks, and unless you learn how to perform slide casting, which I have a short about as well, you can't move at all. If you need to move a significant amount, or need to weave something like Lucid Dreaming, you should at least consider a different spell to make space for this. Holy also stuns all enemies hit for 4 seconds, so you should wait with casting it until the tank is done pulling the enemies together, otherwise it will cause the group a lot of problems in clumping the enemies together in the first place. Note that effects like stuns are affected by the mechanic known as diminishing returns. The first stun lasts a full 4 seconds, the second one only lasts half as long, the third a fourth of the duration, and every application beyond that will not work, leading to Holy spamming granting a total of around 7 seconds of stun. While this could be super convenient to optimize by using the casts smartly, the damage done by the spell is too high to ignore and takes priority way above and beyond what the stun management could. If there are 2 or more targets, Holy should be your default attack. Holy also has a tendency to always get the full 7 seconds of stun, even while spamming it, without having to worry about waiting for the stun to wear off first. I have a separate video demonstrating this too, if you're curious. At level 46, Arrow is upgraded to Arrow 2, greatly increasing its total damage, once again making it superior to Stone 2 if it lasts at least 9 seconds. Holy beats Arrow 2 if there are at least 4 targets, so with 3 targets you should still apply Arrow to all the enemies first. Even so, while the tank is pulling, you should apply Arrow to as many enemies as you can until they're clumped together for Holy. At level 48, you learn the role action and ability Rescue. This only works in combat, and only if you and your target are both in combat, otherwise you will either be incapable of using it or the game will report that you missed. Rescue will, after about a second delay, drag your target to the location you were in when you cast it. Knockback immunities like Surecast also makes players immune to Rescue. The delay before the action takes effect means that you may need to react early when you need to use it for it to be beneficial at all to your target. Remember that Rescue drags the target, so if there's something dangerous between you and the target, this may also cause problems. At level 50, you learn the spell Medica 2, which does not override Medica 1 either. While Medica 2 heals slightly less than Medica 1 up front, the HOT it applies overtakes Medica 1 within 3 seconds. As such, Medica 2 should always be your go-to AoE healing option. In fact, if just 2 players benefit from the full potency of Medica 2, it is more potent and time efficient than all of your other healing spells, including Regen. If your party needs an enormous amount of AoE healing, using Medica 2 once and then using Medica 1 or Cure 3 actually is optimal, as the vast majority of the value of Medica 2 is concentrated in the HOT. You also learn the ability Benediction, the ultimate healing action. It instantly fully heals your target. Its cooldown is quite long though, so do make sure to make it count when you use it. With that said, don't sit on it forever, but also don't throw it out to heal something you could easily have done with a different healing spell. Now, to summarize at level 50, let's cover an actual boss fight opener and rotation and give some brief healing tips. Remember, keeping your party alive is always more important than pushing damage, but being efficient with your time also matters. You can use Medica 2 and Regen to preemptively apply HOTs to your party as needed. As the tank runs up to the boss, cast Stone, followed by Arrow, and then late weave Presence of Mind, and then spam Stone. Remember to maintain Arrow as you spam Stone. Make sure to maintain Arrow on all targets on up to 3 targets, or if you're actively moving. On 2 or more targets, replace Stone with Holy, and on 4 or more targets, skip Arrow in favor of Holy when you can safely stand still for it. For healing, you should make sure to keep Regen active on the tank as long as the tank will benefit from the healing. Cure 2 should be your go-to single target healing option, while Medica 2 is your best AoE healing option. Remember, Take a deep breath. The healing from Medica 2 takes a bit to take effect, so as long as a lot more AoE damage isn't forthcoming, you don't have to top everyone up immediately. At this level, Benediction can be helpful to hold for when things go sideways, mainly because it is your only instantaneous healing option. Holding it to quickly heal up the tank when they drop low can also allow you more time to spam Holy. For massive amounts of AoE healing, start with Medica 2 and then use Medica 1 or Cure 3. For individual players that need a lot of healing, Regen or Cure 2 are the best options. Cure 1 should only be used if you actually cannot afford anything else, or are almost at this point. Finally, remember to use Ishuna to remove annoying or dangerous debuffs with a bluish-white line indicating that they can be removed. And remember to use Lucid Dreaming when you drop below 8000 MP. With that, let's continue on past level 50. At level 52, you gain access to the healing gauge, perhaps more commonly known as the Lily gauge. While in combat, you produce 1 Lily every 20 seconds, up to a maximum of 3. You also learn the spell Afflatus Solace, which spends a Lily on use. Afflatus Solace is effectively a free and instant version of Cure 2. Because Afflatus Solace is a spell and not an ability, it should be used in place of Cure 2. Or if you have nothing else you can cast while running and you have a target that could benefit from the healing. This does indeed mean that you could end up with 3 Lilies and nothing to spend it on. At this level, this is fine. You also learn the ability Asylum, which places a large dome that heals everyone in it for a long time. If you know your group isn't going to leave the area for a while, this is by far your best healing option, so use it whenever this is possible and helpful. To more easily place Asylum, go to Character Configuration and under the Target section, toggle Limit Ring Movement to Targeting Range, and press Action twice to execute. This way, you can always place Asylum immediately within a feasible location by pressing its keybind twice. At level 54, Stone 2 is permanently upgraded to Stone 3, increasing its potency slightly. Arrow 2 now needs to last at least 12 seconds to beat it, rather than just 9. At level 56, you learn the ability Eyes, which does a large amount of damage in a large AoE around you. It also heals all allies for the same potency. It also restores some MP. It also does your homework and makes your bed and walks your dog for you. I'm just joking about that one. But joking aside, this ability does so many good things that even if you only benefit from just one of them, like the damage, it is a good idea to use it on cooldown, weaving it between your spells. At level 58, you learn the ability Thin Air, which makes your next spell cast free. With 2 charges and a 1-minute charge time, this allows you some freedom in which spell to use it on. A particularly powerful spell to combine it with is Raise, with Medica 2 or Cure 3 being strong contenders too. But if you know for certain you won't need a charge, you can always toss it by spending it on Stone. You still save some MP this way, which is better than sitting on 2 charges all the time. At level 60, you learn the ability Tetragrammaton, which simply heals your target as an OGCD on a minute cooldown. This should be considered one of your first options when the tank, or someone else, needs some healing, before you start casting spells for it. Remember to not save Tetragrammaton for a rainy day, as its usefulness comes from its short cooldown alongside its power. At level 64, Stone 3 is permanently upgraded to Stone 4, which again increases its potency slightly. Arrow 2 now needs to last at least 15 seconds to beat it, rather than just 12. At level 66, you learn the ability Divine Benison, which applies a large shield to your target on a short cooldown. As long as the tank is actively taking damage, it is beneficial to use this on cooldown on them between your spell casts. It is also a great option to use just at the start of a fight or while the tank is pulling. At level 70, you learn the ability Plenary Indulgence, which applies a buff to everyone in range that on its own does nothing. Whenever anyone in range is healed by any of your AoE healing spells, it heals them some more. Since the cooldown is surprisingly short, I recommend weaving this just before any AoE healing spell you intend to use, even if it is just Medica 2 and nothing more. The only exception being if you know you will need the extra healing from Plenary Indulgence very shortly. At level 72, Stone 4 and Arrow 2 are permanently upgraded to Glare and Dia, both dealing more damage. Glare is now better than Holy on 2 targets, and Dia is better than Holy on up to 4 targets, and beats Glare if it lasts at least 12 seconds. Remember to apply Dia to enemies as the tank is pulling still. At level 74, your healing gauge is expanded with the Blood Lily. Whenever you spend a lily, you feed the Blood Lily, and when it has been fed 3 times, it blooms. You also learn the spell Afflatus Misery, which does a gigantic amount of damage, with a significant AoE component, at the cost of spending the Blood Lily. It is also an instant spell, so it can be used while on the move. As Afflatus Misery requires you to spend 3 lilies to access, it can, from an attacking perspective, be viewed as an attack that costs 4 GCDs to use. Conveniently, it deals slightly more damage than 4 glares at this point, meaning that it would technically be a DPS gain to toss 3 lilies out for no reason and then cast Afflatus Misery. For this reason, it is heavily recommended to prioritize using lilies for healing if anyone needs it, even over Tetragrammaton, such that you don't ever sit on 3 lilies. This also means that if you have to move a lot, tossing lilies is a valid option to cast if you have nothing else to do. And similarly, saving Afflatus Misery for a little bit if you need to move in a moment is also beneficial. Just make sure to not spend healing lilies when the Blood Lily is blooming. Afflatus Misery is even more overwhelmingly powerful on AoE, so all this advice also applies for AoE, almost even more so. The best time to spend lilies are during periods where there is nothing to attack, as this means you not only get the benefit of blooming the Blood Lily, but it comes without the price of missing out on glare casts. So, if you won't need them, you can toss lilies between dungeon pulls. At level 76, you learn the spell Afflatus Rapture, which spends a lily on use. Afflatus Rapture is effectively a free and instant version of Medica 1, and should be used instead of Afflatus Solace if at least 3 players will benefit, or if Afflatus Rapture is enough to top up all the players you intend to heal anyway. Afflatus Rapture is also easier to use for tossing lilies as it requires no specific target. At level 78, Asylum is upgraded to also increase the healing received by players in its area. This does not really change how you use it at all, but it is a nice addition. At level 80, you learn the ability Temperance, which causes you to grow wings as well as increasing your healing magic potency significantly, while also reducing the damage everyone around you takes for the duration. Its cooldown is not that long for its powerful effect, so try to make regular use of it and get acquainted with what you can do with such power. Sometimes, using Temperance just for the damage reduction is also beneficial, and can even be so on large AoE pulls to help the tank a bit. It is worth pointing out that what is meant by healing magic potency is that only your spells are affected by this boost. Notably, Tetragrammaton, Divine Benison, Assize, and Plenary Indulgence are unaffected. At level 82, Glare and Holy are upgraded to Glare 3 and Holy 3, slightly increasing their potencies. Where did 2 go? No one knows. This means Afflatus Misery is now damage neutral on single target, as it is equal to 4 glare casts. At level 85, all of your healing spells and their added heal over time effects, if any, have their potencies increased slightly. This does not change the way you use them, but it is worth noting that Medica 2 now heals more in total than Cure 2 on a single target. At level 86, you learn the ability Aquaveil, which reduces the damage taken by a lot for another player, or yourself, for a little bit. The primary target to place it on is of course the tank when anticipating a tank buster, although you can use it to blunt the hit of a raid-wide AoE on any party member in a bad spot. In a dungeon context, you should consider using this just as the tank finishes pulling and comes to a stop to soften the initial incoming damage, or use it after the stuns from Holy ends. At level 88, Divine Benison is upgraded to hold 2 charges, so you can use it more liberally. Just make sure to never use it back to back on the same target, as the shield does not stack with itself. Make sure to always have Divine Benison on cooldown by placing shields on the tank to blunt the passive amounts of damage they tend to take. You can also use both charges for this, but keeping one for a big hit might be preferable. At level 90, you learn the ability Liturgy of the Bell, often called simply Lilybell, which places a healing blossom and grants you 5 stacks of Liturgy of the Bell. Whenever you take damage, 1 stack is spent to heal everyone for 400 potency. If after 20 seconds not all stacks are spent, or you use the ability again, the healing blossom detonates all the remaining stacks at once for half the regular healing amount. The primary use of this ability is to use it when anticipating raid-wide damage, or even better, multiple hits of raid-wide damage. You can also place the bell in anticipation of damage, so you can quickly detonate it for half the potency heal, for example for big dungeon pulls. Due to this ability's unique interaction, it is definitely worth taking note of AoE attacks in fights to get the maximum value out of it. Remember, each proper activation is equal to casting Afflatus Rapture. Keep in mind that while the healing radius of Liturgy of the Bell is massive, you may want to place it either in the center of the room or in the center of your group to make sure everyone is affected. At level 92, Presence of Mind is upgraded to grant you 3 stacks of Sacred Sight and turn into Glare 4 until these are spent. Glare 4 is an instant spell that does way more damage than Glare 3 and has an AoE component. Needless to say, these should be spent in every Presence of Mind, although as they are instant, as long as they're spent within any potential raid buffs, you don't have to use them first and can use them for mobility reasons as well. At level 94, Swiftcast's cooldown is reduced to 40 seconds, and the damage of Dia, Afflatus Misery, and Glare are increased. Assuming Dia takes its full duration, it now beats Holy on up to 5 targets. At level 96, Medica 2 permanently upgrades to Medica 3, which increases the healing over time component slightly. This does not change how you use it. At level 98, Tetragrammaton is upgraded to hold 2 charges, greatly increasing its flexibility, but not changing how you use it. At level 100, Temperance is upgraded to grant you Divine Grace for 30 seconds and turn into Divine Caress until used. Divine Caress applies a barrier to you and your party, and either when the barrier breaks or it runs out naturally, it applies a hot. Given the large window where you can use Divine Caress, you can separate Temperance from Divine Caress if you need to. You can also use them together. To round off, let's first talk about an opener for boss fights, followed by more general healing tips and advice to make the most of your tools in dungeons and raids. Finally, we briefly touch on stat priorities. Let's begin. 2.3 seconds before combat starts, start casting Glare. Then, if you intend to use a gem draft, weave it here. Then cast Dia and Glare twice, and weave Presence of Mind into Glare 4, weaving Essize, and another Glare 4. Then spam Glare until Presence of Mind ends, and then use Glare 4 and reapply Dia. Alternatively, make sure to cast Glare 4 1 GCD before raid buffs end, and reapply Dia the last moment before they end if you can. Presence of Mind and SI should be used on cooldown, Dia should be active on all enemy targets, and you fill with Glare. If there are at least 3 targets in range, replace Glare with Holy, and if there are at least 6 targets in range, replace Dia with Holy. Replace Dia on less targets if they won't live the full dot anyway. The opener is intended to ensure that Presence of Mind lines up with the 2-minute burst, and as long as SIs is used on cooldown, it will also align with this burst. The main thing White Mages can do to prepare for the 2-minute burst is to use every second of Afflatus Misery during raid buffs to get even more value out of it. However, the mobility afforded by it and the healing Lilies, as well as the flexibility in healing, may not be worth sacrificing for this burst over the course of a fight. So, adjust accordingly. The 2-minute burst additionally should include a reapplication of Dia, and then simply a lot of Glare casts on top of the 3 Glare 4s. Assuming your 2-minute burst will include Afflatus Misery, it of course replaces 1 Glare 3 cast. Now, for the healing tips section, let's start with dungeon pull advice. Just before the tank begins pulling, apply Regen to them. Then, as they pull, apply Divine Benison. This should give you time to apply Dia to as many individual targets as you can manage. Also, remember to hang out close to the tank while you run. If you manage to hit everything, you can reapply Dia for the instant damage while you continue to run. If the tank needs more healing while running, you can use Afflatus Solace or Tetragrammaton or reapply Divine Benison. You can also reapply Regen. You can also toss Lilies here if you don't believe you will need them during the pull. Do not use Holy while the tank is not finished pulling. Once the tank reaches their destination, optionally use Presence of Mind and SIs, and then start casting Holy repeatedly. The first few Holy casts will stun the enemies for a combined 7 seconds. After that, you can use Glare 4 as a way to weave things as you need without losing damage. Afflatus Misery can and should also be used for this. Once the stuns end, you can use Aquaveil on the tank to reduce the damage they take, and place Asylum. Alternatively, you can also use Temperance and Divine Caress. I recommend using Asylum and Temperance in separate pulls. If you run out of Glare 4s, you can use Afflatus Solace, Regen, or Dia to make space for more OGCD heals like Tetragrammaton, Divine Benison, Essize, or even Benediction. Finally, in case things go sideways, remember you have options like Cure 2, and that you can even put down Liturgy of the Bell just as one big healing burst. To set up big healing over time, should that seem helpful, you can use Regen, weave Plenary Indulgence and either Tetragrammaton or Divine Benison, and then cast Medica 3 to really boost the healing. For raid healing, it is a lot more complicated, and the simplest answer is to make sure to use your toolkit efficiently to deal with each mechanic. Making regular use of Divine Benison can save you from having to heal a lot of damage over the course of a fight. Assisting the tanks with tank busters by using Aquaveil can be massively helpful. Taking note of when a lot of raid-wide damage is coming so you can use Liturgy of the Bell or Temperance and Divine Caress beforehand is also helpful. Beyond this, the vast majority of White Mage raid healing boils down to dealing with the healing after the damage has been taken. This means you should mostly be concerned with whether there is enough time for your raid to recover before the next big hit comes up, so you don't overspend resources to deal with something that Medica 3 alone, for example, would have dealt with. Remember to make regular use of Plenary Indulgence as it is often forgotten, and also don't forget to use Lucid Dreaming a lot. I recommend using it on cooldown, and you're sure to get the full value out of it if you're actively casting and below 8000 MP when it is activated, most of the time. In more difficult content like Savage Raids, planning when you use which cooldowns beforehand may be particularly helpful. For example, planning when you will use your Lilies may help to naturally lead you to having Afflatus Misery ready for the raid cooldowns. Finally, regarding stat priorities, take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level as long as it has Mind on it. After that, White Mage's stat priority is critical hit, then enough spell speed, then direct hit, and finally determination. What is meant by enough spell speed is that items with critical hit and spell speed on them are all good, but if you're going to meld materia, I recommend only melding spell speed if a single materia will reduce your GCD by 0.01, or if you're targeting a very specific GCD. While direct hit does not actually boost your healing output, and determination does, the fact that healers never find direct hit on their gear naturally means that melding direct hit materia will be better for increasing your damage output. If you're worried about lack of healing while progressing hard content, determination can sometimes be worth prioritizing higher. Finally, Piety is a stat that increases healers' passive MP regeneration in combat. However, it does not provide anything else. So if you don't run out of MP while using your tools like As-Eyes and Lucid Dreaming, then any excess piety you have on your gear is worthless. As such, while piety can sometimes be necessary to meet the MP demands of an encounter, White Mage is capable of functioning without it, so you should only go out of your way to get extra piety if you know you need it. Additionally, keep in mind that spell speed directly increases the amount of MP you will use in a fight, so this can also be a factor in your decision to get piety. Unfortunately, this is a more subjective stat, and so you have to make this decision for yourself. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Shadowbringers, the Afflatus spells did not exist, and instead, Secret of the Lily was a 20% chance to gain a Lily every time you cast Cure 1 or 2. These Lilies instead had the effect that when Asylum, As-Eyes, Divine Benison, or Tetragrammaton was used, the Lilies would be spent to reduce the cooldown by 4, 10, or 20% depending on the number of Lilies, while consuming the Lilies. So anyway, this of course meant damage-wise you would always want to use it on As-Eyes, if you got any Lilies in the first place. Cure 1 and Cure 2 only, remember?